Okay, good morning, everyone, and especially good morning, Dhungsey Asanga Vajra Rinpoche. Thank you so much for accepting the request to teach on Lojong today. And yeah, I'm very honored and happy that this is happening today. Yeah, I think most of you know Dungse Rinpoche. He was born in Seattle, 1999. So he's still a very young but already wonderful and very learned Tibetan master from the Sakya tradition. And so the grandson of Jigdral Dakchen Rinpoche, His Holiness, who also lived in Seattle. And by that, he is a direct descendant of the wonderful Khön family. And so, yeah, it's such an honor to have you here, Dungse Rinpoche, and to have everybody here, of course, also. And today, yeah, Rinpoche accepted to teach on Lojong, the 7-point mind training. And I sent you the link of the translation that Dungse Rinpoche will use. I sent that in the email, but Paula will also send that here in the chat. And I think it's in Tibetan, English, and Portuguese. It's a wonderful translation by Adam Percy, who's a very good and reliable translator. And if you don't mind, we would start with the prayers now. And Paula, maybe you can share them. Just one moment. And it would be nice if you keep your video on during the teaching so that Dungse Rinpoche can see the audience, and keep your microphone off so that we can hear Rinpoche. Wait, we just have, yeah, now the prayers are showing. I see the prayers. There. Okay, but I can see them here. Sorry for that. I just okay, you see the refuge, and I will do so. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and the rest, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and the rest, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and the rest, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. May they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. Supplication to the Buddha. With skillful means and compassion, you were born in the Sakya clan. Unconquerable by others, you vanquished Mara's hordes. Your physical form resplendent like a mountain of gold. To you, the king of the Sakyas, we pay homage. Through your wide eyes, you see all that is cognizable. Through your compassion, you accomplish well-being for all wandering beings. Through the strength you wield, you carry out activities that are inconceivable. Guru Manjunatha, I offer homage with my head at your feet. We are requesting the teaching with a short mandala offering. The ground is purified with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with the Sumera, the king of mountains, the 4 quarters of the universe, and the sun and the moon. Thinking of it as the blessed Buddha fields, I offer it. By virtue of this offering, may all beings here and now attain the happiness of that pure land. Tram Guru Ratna Mandala Puja Mega Samudra Saparana Samaya Ahong. In accordance with the capabilities and diverse aspirations of sentient beings, we ask you to please turn the wheel of the Dharma, of the greater, lesser, or conventional vehicle. Thank you so much, and over to you, Rinpoche. Please teach us. Thank you.
Nam Godanya Bessimje Dam Jigget no Tojelana Majiba and Habazo Sangi Govan Pajiniga Tonga Bacha, the Shido Tambeche, Samusana, Sushin Dunyam Sona Q. Nyabasamba Chanjugi to the Toy Baba Sada and Sembana Wara Shu de la Dreca, Sembra Chevechini, Gavishini Gadaba Geshe Chekawa Yeshe Dorje, Lojong Dungma Shepa Chawa. So first of all, I would like to offer my greetings to everyone who is gathered here to receive the precious teaching today. And I guess there's no translation, so I'll just continue straight away. So I'm very happy today that to be teaching here at the request of Buddhism in Berlin, and it is a very honor to teach for you all here today. And actually, this is, you could say, the first teaching that I'm giving in 2022. So I think it's a wonderful start. So the teaching which I was requested to give today is the 7 points of mind training. And mind training is very important because, generally, the teachings of the Buddha is very vast. It is very vast, and we have such a short life that it's very difficult to study everything there is. And so what we have in the mind training is the condensed, or everything that the Buddha taught is complete in the mind training. So it's a mind training usually has few words, but it encompasses the whole, or you could say, complete teachings of the Buddha. So it makes it very easy for practitioners, especially of the degenerate ages, and also the beginners particularly. So it's a very good teaching to meditate on. And so the author is Geshe Chekawa Yeshe Dorje, an important Kadamba master. He was born in 1101 and passed away in 1175. He was the disciple of Geshe Sharawa, who was also a Kadamba master. And they in turn were disciples of George Epadan Atisha, who in turn was the disciple of Joe Selingba, and so on. So this teaching which Geshe Chekawa has written is based on the teachings which he had heard from his teacher. So it's like sort of the teachings were passed down from one master to another, and the essence of what was passed down was written into words by Geshe Chekawa. So before we receive the teaching, what's most important is that we develop the bodhichitta, the generation of the enlightenment thought for the sake of all sentient beings. This is the right motivation that we should have before we receive the teaching, while we're receiving the teaching, and even after receiving the teaching when we dedicate. So this is very important. So do please keep that in mind. And so now to start the actual teaching, there's 7 points, as the name itself implies, 7 points. So the first is the preliminaries. So it says here, the first slogan reads, first train in the preliminaries. So what that means is the foundation to practice, or you could say for the foundation of meditating on bodhichitta, the mind or thought of enlightenment, we need to practice on the preliminaries. And to understand the preliminaries, there are several preliminaries that we need to practice. There is Guru Yoga, that is one of the preliminaries. There is meditation on the verity of the human birth, and that is the second. Then there is the meditation on impermanence and death, which is the third. Then there is the meditation on the law of cause and effect, that is the fourth. And then there is the meditation on the faults of samsara, which is the fifth. So we have 5 preliminaries that we need to practice on. So these are very important before we practice, and you'll find out why. Because first of all, Guru Yoga is important. The beginning of the practice, and especially during the actual practice, Guru Yoga is necessary, because it is the swiftest way to receive the blessings from the Guru. And so Guru Yoga is actually a Vajrayana practice, which can be practiced as part of the preliminary for the 7-point mind training. And Guru Yoga does not exist in the Sutrayana or the Sutra path. And it also doesn't exist for the Kriya, the Charya, and the Yoga Tantras, which are the 3 lower Tantras. It only is the quality of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the highest Tantra class. So when we practice Guru Yoga, we're supposed to see the guru as none other than the Buddha himself or herself. So that is the practice of Guru Yoga. And it was thanks to Guru Yoga that 3 of Sachin Kongwan Yinpa's disciples attained enlightenment in one lifetime. Sakya Pandita himself attained enlightenment in one lifetime, and Chögyam Papa also attained enlightenment in one lifetime. So usually in the Sutrayana path, enlightenment, it takes a very long time to attain, 3 incalculable aeons. So you need to be very patient. But if you can't wait that long, we have the Vajrayana practice, which is Guru Yoga. So with that, you can attain enlightenment in one lifetime. And it's really a time saver. So it's really worth doing it, practicing that. So that is the first preliminary. And once again, the purpose of practicing that is to swiftly receive the blessings. So once we receive the blessings from the Guru, then it becomes easier to practice because the obscurations and the obstacles on the path have been dispelled. And so it makes it much easier. And then for the sake of making this human body that we have attained meaningful, we need to practice meditation on the rarity of the human birth. So this is the second preliminary. In the Kadamba textbooks, there are many examples on meditating on this topic. One such example is that we may take a handful of grain in the palm of our hands and to throw it towards a wall. And when we throw the grains on the wall, the chances of a grain sticking to the wall is very unlikely. It's most probably that the grains will fall straight down to the ground. But it's not impossible still for 1 or 2 grains to stick to the wall. So we say that attaining the human birth is even more rare than the occurrence of a grain sticking to the wall. And the reason why is because it's in the nature of sentient beings to accumulate more negative deeds than good deeds. And because the Buddha taught of the law of cause and effect, cause and result, if you accumulate good deeds, you attain good rebirth. If you do bad deeds, you attain an inferior rebirth or unfortunate rebirth. So compared to the number of sentient beings, other types of sentient beings, the human population is much less. For example, we can do a rough estimation. Sort of scientists and people can roughly estimate how many people are living in Earth. We can do a rough estimation of the population, but it's very difficult to give like a rough estimation on exact number of how many bugs live under a tree stump. That's very difficult. So just by that example, we can understand how less the human population is compared to other types of beings and how precious it is and how rare it is. So not just that, but not all beings have the opportunity to practice the Dharma, to meet the teachers, to receive the Dharma teachings, to practice loving kindness and compassion, to generate wisdom, and so on. So this is just, this is one of the advantages that we have as humans. We have this advantage. So we need to really value this human birth that we have attained and not let it go to waste. And so for that, we need to practice this rarity of human birth, meditating on that. And if we can practice and train our minds in meditating on this, we can eventually become like the Kadamba master known as Geshe Chekawa. So Geshe Chekawa was one of the important Kadamba masters, and he would always meditate on the rarity of the human birth. And he meditated and understood this so well that it is said that he never once slept, because he understood that life is so short and sleeping is a waste of time. You're losing so much. You could do so much other wonderful things by practicing instead of sleeping. So he understood that the time he had with his body, with his human body, is limited. So therefore, he just thought that it was not worth wasting. So he never bothered to really sleep. So we can become like him if we practice well. I'm not saying that we should abandon sleeping, but the dedication to the practice we can become similar to how he was and how he practiced. So that is the second preliminary. The third preliminary practice is the meditation on death and impermanence. And the reason why, or the purpose of practicing this, is to develop diligence in our Dharma practice. The reason why we are sort of lazy most of the time in doing our Dharma practice is because we lack the meditation on death and impermanence. We always, or most often, think that we have enough time to put things off for the future, and to just maybe relax and take things slowly and gradually. But there's actually no guarantee that we would live to our 60s or 70s or 80s. There's no guarantee that we would even live to see the next day. There's no guarantee at all. So if you think about that, that also helps and supports in strengthening the practice of understanding, or you could say valuing the human birth. And also it helps one to speeden one's practice in the Dharma. And the sort of examples that we can think about regarding this topic are the autumn clouds. The autumn clouds are always moving. They don't stay in one place. They're always moving. And then we can also think of the dance movements of a fine dancer. It's very swift. It doesn't stay in one place. And then we can also think of lightning in the night, or in the dark of the sky. Lightning, it just suddenly appears and it's suddenly gone. So likewise, each moment is it's changing at each moment. Each passing moment, we are aging. We are moving on. We're not stuck. We're not being stuck in one place, but we're always moving on. So it's like that, ever changing. And we can also think of the idea of a waterfall. The water is always going down, and it keeps on moving down and moving to some other place even after moving down. So like that, this is the nature of our life. It's ever changing. And if we can practice like that, we can eventually become like the Kadamba Geshe known as Kara Gomchung. So Kadamba Geshe Kara Gomchung, he lived or meditated in a cave. And right in front of the entrance of his cave, there was a bush. And this sort of made obstacles for him to enter and to exit his cave, because it was right at the entrance. And each time he entered his cave, his clothes would get stuck to the branches, and it would sometimes scrape his body and leave marks on his body and so on. And he first thought, maybe I should just cut this bush off, so it can clear the path for me. It would be much easier for me. But then he thought, well, even if I did cut it, who knows if I will even be able to get out of the cave after entering it. There's no guarantee. I might even live to get out of the cave, so it's not worth cutting it. Just let it go. So he just entered, even though there was that bush in front of the entrance. And even after entering, then he thought again, maybe I should cut it because it's blocking the way to get out of the cave. But then he thought again, well, there's no guarantee that after I go out, I can return back into the cave, because I might even be dead by then. So it's not worth cutting the bush. So like that, he just left the bush and continued on with his practice on impermanence. So we can become like him if we train ourselves in the meditation on impermanence. So that is the third preliminary. The fourth preliminary is meditating on the law of cause and effect. And the purpose of doing this is to understand well what is to be accepted and what is to be rejected. Because once we are living in samsara, we are subject to the law of cause and effect. We are part of samsara. We need to live by samsara's rules, you could say. So therefore, we need to do good deeds and abandon negative deeds. And in order to do good deeds and abandon negative deeds, we need to understand how karma, or the law of cause and effect, really works. So we need to think about that and meditate on that. And by meditating on that, we generate a good understanding on what should be done and what should be avoided. So that is the purpose of meditating on that. And if we are able to meditate on that well, we can become like Geshe Ben. So there was a great Kadamba master known as Geshe Ben, who was well trained in the practice of meditating on law of cause and effect. And then one day there was a sponsor of his who was planning to visit him. So when he heard that the sponsor was coming to visit him, he immediately cleaned his room and cleaned off the dust on his shrine and set beautiful offerings in front of the shrine, just to impress the sponsor, to leave a good impression of him as being a good Dharma practitioner. So that's what he thought of doing. But then, and he actually started the work a bit of cleaning and doing all that. And then, right while he was doing that, he caught himself. He caught himself in the act of impressing the sponsor, and he found out that what I'm doing is not true Dharma practice. I'm not cleaning and putting offerings, placing offerings in front of the shrine out of great reverence to the three jewels, but I'm doing it rather to impress my sponsor. So this is not right. And so right after he caught himself in that action, he took a handful of dust and threw it on the shrine. And so that is what he did. And later, when there's a master known as Pathamba Sangye, he was the founder of the Shije, or the pacification tradition in Tibet. And he was the husband of Majik Labdrin, the founder of the Chö practice. So he with his cleverness, understood what had occurred in Geshe Ben's quarters. And right when he knew about that, he said, there is no better practitioner in Tibet than Geshe Ben, because he understood that Geshe Ben, the type of practice that he is doing is very honest, very honest type of practice. So that is the comment that he made about Geshe Ben. So we can also become like him if we train ourselves in the practice of meditating on the law of cause and effect. And then we have the practice on meditating on the faults of samsara. This is the fifth preliminary, and the purpose of doing this is to generate great renunciation from samsara, and the wish to escape from samsara, the faults of samsara, to not be associated with it. So if we can understand the faults of samsara, what's really wrong about samsara, then we can become like Geshe Langtangpa. The Kadamba Geshe Langtangpa is said to have only laughed once in his lifetime. He was very serious, it seems, and he didn't laugh often, because everything that seemed pleasurable in samsara, he understood as sort of like the nature of the change of suffering, basically suffering, because it's not true happiness. But he laughed once, because one time while he was meditating, it happened that there was a mandala placed in front of him, and there was a jewel on the top of the mandala. And then he saw one mouse running towards the mandala, and the mouse tried to take the jewel off the mandala and tried to steal it. But the jewel was too heavy for the mouse to take it. So the mouse called on another of his or her friends, another mouse, and together some mice took the jewel away from Geshe Langtangpa, and they took it into their own place. So Geshe Langtangpa saw all of that happening. So that just made him laugh once. Otherwise, it said that he never laughed. So that is an example of practicing the meditation on the faults of samsara. So these are very important. The reason why we don't have renunciation, we don't have good renunciation, is because we don't understand the faults of samsara too well. And the reason why we are not able to keep our vows well is because we don't understand the law of cause and effect well. And the reason why we are lazy often in our Dharma practice is because we don't recollect impermanence and death. And the reason why we don't want to put our body to the use of Dharma practice is because we don't recollect the rarity of the human birth. So therefore, these preliminaries are very important. And it sort of establishes the foundation for all of the following mind training practices. So with this, we have completed the preliminary, and which is the first of the 7 points. And now we come to the main practice. And when we speak of the main practice, there are several topics, such as absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Absolute bodhicitta is the same as ultimate bodhicitta. And then there's the relative bodhicitta, and so on. So first of all, to speak about the absolute bodhicitta, there is the meditation on absolute bodhicitta and the post-meditation on absolute bodhicitta. And for the meditation on absolute bodhicitta, there is the preliminary on the meditation on the absolute bodhicitta, and also the actual meditation on the absolute bodhicitta. So now to speak of the preliminary meditating on the absolute bodhicitta, the slogan is count the breaths for conceptual thoughts. So this, I notice, is not in the textbook. I don't know why. When I received the teaching on the 7 points of mind training from my own teacher, there were several extra slogans in the text that we received and that he taught. And I find that these extra slogans are missing in many of the other Tibetan versions of the 7 point mind training, and also the translations in English. So I just added them. I'm going to add them today, include them, because it sort of makes sense anyways. So it's not in the text, but we're going to add this one slogan: count the breaths for conceptual thoughts. So this is the preliminary on meditating on the absolute bodhicitta. So what this means is that before we meditate on absolute bodhicitta, we need to make sure that all the conceptual thoughts are gone, because we cannot meditate. Meditation on absolute bodhicitta, which is the same as meditating on emptiness, cannot go along with conceptual meditation. Emptiness meditation is a conceptless meditation. It has to be a conceptless meditation. So therefore, we need to first get rid of the thoughts. Maybe it's good to understand what absolute bodhicitta or ultimate bodhicitta first means. Absolute bodhicitta is the wisdom which the enlightened bodhisattvas have to directly perceive the nature of things as they are, or directly, in other words, you could say, it is the wisdom within the enlightened bodhisattvas which directly perceives emptiness. So that is what absolute or ultimate bodhicitta means. So that means that we cannot have this absolute bodhicitta yet. It's not something that we can have until we attain the first level of a bodhisattva, and from there on. Until that point, we cannot have the absolute bodhicitta. It's impossible for sentient beings. But we can still generate a sort of like a duplicate, something similar to an absolute bodhicitta. And the way we can do that is by first getting rid of the conceptualist, the concept in one's mind. We have many concepts in one's minds because we have a thought process. One concept comes after another. We can't really control it. But one way that we can sort of silence these concepts temporarily is by counting one's breath. So we need to do this 21 times. We need to inhale through the nose and keep the breath, and then exhale from the nose. And you count that as 1. And then you need to repeat that kind of thing 21 times. Inhale, keep it, and exhale the air from one's nose. And do that 21 times again and again. And after you do that, you'll notice that your mind has been, because your mind was focused on the breaths, it wasn't following any other kind of distractions or concepts. So your mind is now a bit more relaxed compared to before the time you did the breathing meditation. So this is why it is considered as the preliminary for meditating on the absolute bodhicitta. So this is what we need to do for the preliminary. And now for the actual meditation on the absolute bodhicitta, we have the slogan, consider all things and events as dreamlike. So what that means is that just like your dreams, all that you perceive of the nature of your own mind. When we meditate, we might perceive a lot of things. Actually, in Tibetan Buddhism, we don't really have, according to these days, there are many people who do meditation with their eyes closed, but actually, according to the authentic Buddhist scriptures, our eyes need to be a bit opened, not completely opened, but not completely closed. But we see a lot of the Buddha statues with the eyes sort of like that. There's a balance between being completely open and completely closed. So it needs to be something like that. So while our eyes are like that during the meditation, we still will perceive things. And when we perceive those things, we need to understand that it is just like a dream. When we dream, we see a lot of things in our dream. We see people, we see places, and so on. But in reality, all the people and the places and the things we experience in our dream is nothing but the doing or the nature of our own mind. So likewise, when we practice or meditate on absolute bodhicitta and we happen to perceive things meanwhile, we need to understand that everything that we perceive is nothing but the nature of one's own mind. So that is what this means. And then it says, the slogan after that, examine the nature of unborn awareness. So we earlier said that whatever we perceive, we need to understand it as the nature of one's own mind. So now what is the mind itself? That question arises. So we need to answer that. What is the mind itself? So the answer to that is examine the nature of unborn awareness. So what that means is that if you want to know what your mind is, the nature of what your mind is, the answer to that is your mind is free from abiding, and your mind is free from creation, abiding, and cessation, and therefore is free from the four extremes or four elaborations. So that is the nature of one's mind. Because one's mind is empty from the very beginning, there was never a time for it to be created. It's unborn. Its nature is unborn. Because it was never created, or because it was never born, it cannot abide. And because it cannot abide, it cannot cease. And so that is the nature of one's own mind. And this is emptiness, and it is free from the four extremes, which is existence, non-existence, and both existence and non-existence are neither existence nor non-existence. To put it simply, it's free from any terms or concepts. That is the nature. It's indescribable, basically. So that is the nature of one's own mind. And we need to abide in that nature of one's own mind. And then the slogan after that reads, let even the antidote be freed in its own place. So then you might wonder, what about the understanding of emptiness itself? What is that? And the answer to that is that itself is also empty and free from the four extremes if analyzed. So basically what we've gone through so far is saying that whatever we perceive is empty. It's the nature of one's own mind. Mind itself is empty. It is free from creation, abiding, and cessation. It's unborn, unabiding, and unceasing, and therefore indescribable. And what about the understanding of emptiness itself? Well, that also is empty. It does not have any nature. That understanding itself is free from any nature. So that is what Geshe Chekawa is saying here. And then it reads, rest in the alaya, the essence. So then one might wonder, how should one practice the absolute bodhicitta? How do we practice? Earlier, Geshe Chekawa did say that we need to practice, but then how do we practice it? How do we really practice it? So the answer to that is rest in the alaya, the essence. And that means in the mind, which is simply clear alaya. Alaya is base consciousness. So in the mind, which is simply base consciousness or alaya, which is free from the four extremes and empty of nature, if one does not grasp to that nature, if one is not attached or grasped, or if one does not hold any grasping to that nature, which is free from the four extremes, to that base consciousness, which is free from any existence, if one does not grasp onto anything, then and just leaves it as it is in the ultimate nature, then that is the practice or way to practice absolute bodhicitta. So what this basically means is that the nature of one's consciousness, the base consciousness, is from the very beginning empty, free from any nature. And because it is empty and free from any nature, one does not need to bother to describe it or try to understand it. Try to just leave it as it is. Just as it is empty in the reality, just leave it as it is and understand that. And if you can understand it in that way, understand it as being in that way, then that is the practice on absolute bodhicitta. Or you could say that is the practice on meditating on emptiness. So base consciousness, it can be a bit complicated to understand, but it's basically something that we have had from beginningless lifetime, from the very beginning. Actually, you know, since we've been in samsara, samsara is beginningless, and there's no beginning which you can pinpoint to. And therefore, the births that we have taken in the past are also sort of like countless. So we've had this alaya or base consciousness from the very beginning up until now, and we will also continue to have it up until we attain enlightenment. It's there for the whole journey. So this base consciousness itself is inseparable from the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the taste consciousness, and the body consciousness, and so on. It's inseparable from all of these consciousness. It serves as a base for all of those, and it also serves as a base to accumulate good deeds and negative deeds. But it itself is not categorized as either good or bad. It's sort of like neutral. So that is sort of, for now, we can understand the base consciousness in that way. So that is the teaching on how to practice absolute bodhicitta. And then Geshe Chekawa writes, between sessions, be a conjurer of illusions. So this is a teaching on the post-meditation of absolute bodhicitta. So up until now, we've been talking about how to practice absolute bodhicitta when we are, you know, in the actual meditation session. So this is like, now we're speaking about how do we practice absolute bodhicitta in the post-meditation, you know, after we wake up, after we get up from the meditation session. How do we continue the absolute bodhicitta practice? And for that, Geshe Chekawa writes, between sessions, be a conjurer of illusions. So what this means is that in our, you know, daily life, when we go walking, or when we are sitting, or when we are eating, or when we are sleeping, or any kind of activity we are doing, we will see a lot of things going on. We will perceive a lot of things, and we should understand that all of these things that we are perceiving are similar to an illusion. You know, just like we say, when you're going in the desert and it's very hot, you'll start to see things that don't exist, such as water and places and trees. But when you actually go there and go close to it, there's nothing to find because it's all an illusion. So likewise, during the post-meditation, we will see a lot of things, but and we should understand that it is similar to an illusion, because if we do look into their nature, there's nothing, no kind of existence or nothing true in them that we can find to be, you know, truly existing. There's nothing that we can find, no true existence in them. So therefore, it's similar to an illusion. So if we can understand that during the post-meditation, that is the way to practice meditation on absolute. That is the way to practice absolute bodhicitta in the post-meditation. And now, following that, there's another slogan which is sort of missing in the text that you have. So I added it. It reads, first, practice well, kindness and compassion. So what this is that we're now speaking on how to practice relative bodhicitta. So to speak about relative bodhicitta, there's also the preliminaries and the actual practice on relative bodhicitta. So we are now speaking about the preliminaries on relative bodhicitta. So in order to prepare oneself to practice relative bodhicitta, how should we prepare? What should we do? So Chekawa writes, first, practice well kindness and compassion. So what this means is that for the foundation of meditating on relative bodhicitta, we need to train our minds in practicing loving kindness towards all sentient beings. Loving kindness is the part in which you wish for all sentient beings to be happy and to be endowed with the causes of happiness. So that is loving kindness. And you should also train in the practice of compassion, which is wishing for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So if you can train your mind in these two thoughts, then it establishes a foundation to build relative bodhicitta on that. So that is the purpose of practicing these two. And now, following that, there's a slogan, train in the two, giving and taking alternately. So what that means is that we are now speaking about the actual meditation on relative bodhicitta. So we earlier spoke about the preliminary. Now this is the actual meditation on relative bodhicitta. So how do we actually practice relative bodhicitta? The way to do that is to give and to take. In Tibetan, it's called donglen. And it's basically the exchange of oneself and others. You exchange your happiness and you exchange your happiness and their suffering. So you take upon yourself the suffering of all sentient beings, and you give them in exchange all of the happiness that you have. And this is how you practice relative bodhicitta. So how can we practice this? Should we focus just on giving, or should we focus just on taking? The answer is you should do this alternatively, take turns. First, you take upon yourself all of their suffering and the causes of suffering that they have. And then following that, don't just always practice on that, but also practice on exchanging your happiness by giving them all of your happiness and the causes of happiness so that they will not have to suffer and they can enjoy happiness instead. So this is how you should practice. And the slogan following that is also connected with this. It says, these two are to be mounted on the breath. So this is a solution on practicing the giving and taking. It's an easy solution because Geshe Chekawa is saying that we can use our breath to practice giving and taking. So when we inhale through our nose, we can visualize that we are inhaling all of the bad karma and the suffering and the causes of suffering, which all sentient beings have. And we can visualize that all of those are combined into some sort of dark form, some sort of dark ball or some sort of dark energy. And we inhale this dark energy to our nose, and by that we take upon ourselves their suffering. And then when we exhale, we can visualize that all of one's body, all of one's wealth, all of one's happiness, all of one's causes of happiness, and so on, are combined into some sort of like a white energy ball or some sort of white energy, and it exhales out of one's nose, and it goes to all sentient beings. It is shared with all sentient beings. So by that they can enjoy happiness, and so it may also serve as a cause for them to attain enlightenment. So this is the practice on how you can do giving and taking by using the breath, by focusing on the breath. And so following that, we have the next slogan, 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 sources of virtue. So we are now speaking about the activities that we need to do in the meditation of practicing relative bodhicitta. So three objects means beauty and ugliness and what is neutral. So those are the three objects. Three poisons are attachment, hatred, and ignorance. And three sources of virtue are the root of virtue, which is free from attachment, the root of virtue, which is free from hatred, and the root of virtue, which is free from ignorance. So that is what each of these three mean. So the way we can practice this in the post-meditation is that when attachment, hatred, and ignorance arises due to the objects such as beauty, ugliness, and what's neutral, we should try to transform these into all these negative emotions, into the thoughts, into the root of virtue, such as the root of virtue of attachment, free from attachment, root of virtue free from hatred, and root of virtue free from ignorance. So this is what it means. Basically, we have three objects. There's some things we find very beautiful, such as a person that we like, an attractive person or attractive object, and so on. And some things we find unpleasant to see. And then some things we don't really care too much. It's neither attractive nor unattractive. So when we look at these things that we are attracted to, it's natural that attachment arises due to that. And when we see things that are unattractive, it's natural for hatred or something like anger to arise, especially if it's something that really bothers oneself. And then if it's something that is, if the object is sort of like neutral, then we wouldn't really care. It's just ignorance would arise from that. So these thoughts are negative emotions. It's natural to arise because we are sentient beings. But when we practice mind training, we should try to transform these thoughts into something more positive. And so we can, when the attachment arises in one's mind, we can transform it into the root of virtue, which is free from attachment. And when anger or hatred arises, we can transform that into the root of virtue, which is free from hatred. And when ignorance arises, we can transform that into the root of virtue, which is free from ignorance. So this is what Geshe Chekawa is saying. And this is what we can do when we do the post-meditation on relative bodhicitta practice. And then there's another slogan which is missing, and there's quite a lot. In order to recollect that, so I just added that, in order to recollect that, and what that means is that in order to train in remembering the relative bodhicitta, and then we continue with the slogan following that, in all activities, train by applying slogans. So in order to train in remembering the relative bodhicitta, we need to remember it because it's easy to forget to practice often. So we need to remind ourselves that we need to practice this because it's so important. So in order to remember it, the best reminder to practice to practice relative bodhicitta is to remember the slogans or remember what Arya Nagarjuna said. So you should verbally recite one of Nagarjuna's sayings. He wrote something as, "May the suffering of mother sentient beings ripen upon me, and may my happiness bring comfort to them all." So this is what he wrote. It's in one of his works, and we should verbally recite this so we can hear it ourselves. If we can verbally recite this, it will remind ourselves to practice, and it will also leave an impact on the mind. And eventually, just as the slogan itself says, we will be able to naturally think of it once we train our mind in hearing this slogan often. So we need to remind ourselves by verbally reciting this, whether we are sleeping, or maybe it's difficult to do when sleeping, but in the past, masters were able to do that. But for what we can do right now is we can do that while we are walking, while we are sitting, and while we are eating, and so on. So when we are doing such activities, we need to verbally recite this. And so that is the way to recollect the practice on relative bodhicitta. And then the slogan following that reads, begin the process of taking with yourself. So what this means is that before you start taking on all the sufferings and causes of suffering of others upon yourself, you should first train in taking upon all of your own suffering and causes of suffering upon yourself. And that may sound a bit confusing, but what that means is that, for example, right now, at this very moment, if one is suffering, if one is unhappy, we should visualize that at this very moment when I'm unhappy, I am experiencing, or may I experience all of the unhappiness, all of the suffering which is in store for me in the future as well, up until I attain enlightenment. Whatever suffering is in store for me in the future, may I experience it all right now at one go, at this very moment while I'm suffering. So if we can train ourselves in taking upon all of the suffering which is in store for us at one go, then if we are trained in that, then eventually it will be much easier to train in taking upon all of the sufferings of all sentient beings upon oneself. So this is what Geshe Chekawa is saying. So with this, we have completed the second topic, which is the main practice. Now we come to the third topic, which is transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment. So the slogan reads, when all the world is filled with evil, so what that means is that when one is suffering now due to, when one is facing adversity, such as, poor living situations, poor health, and an unhappy mind, and especially when others are harming oneself, bothering oneself, and basically when one is unhappy, we should understand that all of this is due to one's own past bad karma, and it is. So we should understand that. All of this, it cannot be blamed upon others, but it's due to one's own past bad karma that all of this is happening. So when all the world is filled with evil, transform adversity into the path of enlightenment. So transform adversity into the path of enlightenment. What that means is that when one is facing adversity, one should not succumb to all these unfortunate situations that one is facing, but rather transform them into the path of enlightenment. And if you're wondering, how can we transform all of the adversity that we face into the path of enlightenment? There are three ways to do so. We can transform all of the negative circumstances or all of the adversity that we face into the path of enlightenment to relative bodhicitta. We can transform all of the adversity that we face into the path of enlightenment through the practice of absolute bodhicitta. And we can transform all of the adversity that we face into the path of enlightenment to superior actions. So there are three methods, you could say. So now we are going to speak about the first method, transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment through relative bodhicitta. So for that, there's the slogan, drive all blames into one. So what that means is that you should drive all the blame of your sufferings upon your own self-grasping, which you have in your mind. So from beginning this lifetime, we've had this very self-grasping thought or self-cherishing thought. So we should understand that whatever bad things that happen or happening to oneself, it cannot be blamed upon others, but the only but the only place one can blame it upon is one's own self-grasping. I think there is a saying by Gyase Chekawa, the author of the 37 Practices of Bodhicitta, of a Bodhisattva. He wrote that all of the sufferings which one has, so all sufferings come from self-cherishing. And he wrote which is Buddhahood comes from the thought of cherishing others. So this is, I think it means the same thing. All of the problems that we face right now, suffering, adversity, and so on, it comes from the thought of self-cherishing. So therefore, we need to really deal with the self-cherishing. We need to understand that this is the root of all of our problems, and we must try to abandon it and deal with this problem. So this is the first step. We need to recognize and pinpoint the root of all of our problems, which is self-grasping. And then following that, it writes, it's written, meditate on the great kindness of all. So what that means is that having understood all of one's problems are due to one's own self-grasping, all of the adversity one faces arises due to one's own self-grasping. One should understand that all those who are harming oneself right now were actually kind to oneself in the past, because all sentient beings, especially those who are harming oneself, were at one point one's own mother in a past life. And during that time, when we were born to them, they were very kind in taking care of us. So there was a time when they were actually very kind to us. So we need to remember their kindness. And we also need to remember that, you could say, we also need to understand that not only were they kind, were all sentient beings, especially those who are harming oneself right now, kind to oneself in the past, but they will also be kind to oneself in the future as well. Because when one attains enlightenment eventually in the future, it will be thanks to all sentient beings. Because one of the main causes of attaining enlightenment is the meditation or practice of compassion. And for compassion, there needs to be an object, which is sentient beings. If there's no sentient beings, there's no object to practice compassion. So because they will all serve as the object of your compassion, that will one day lead you to enlightenment. It will be thanks to them. So in that way, you'll understand that in the past, sentient beings who have harmed oneself were kind, and they will also be kind to oneself in the future. And so this gives you an even more reason to put all the blame upon yourself, whatever adversity you face, upon yourself rather than others. And when I say put it upon yourself, it's mainly to put it on the self-grasping or self-cherishing that you have. And so that is what that means, meditate on the great kindness of all. And then following that, now we come to the topic, which is transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment to absolute bodhicitta. So we finished transforming, or the method to transform it to relative bodhicitta. Now it's to absolute or ultimate bodhicitta. For that, Geshe Chekawa writes, meditating on delusory perceptions as the four kayas. So what this means is that when one is suffering due to adversity, one should look into the nature of adversity itself. One should look into its nature. What is adversity? When you look into the nature of adversity, you will find that all adversity is unborn, thus the Dharmakaya. And all adversity is unabiding, thus the Nimanakaya. All adversity is unceasing, therefore the Sambhogakaya. And since it is inseparable from these three, it is the Svabhavikakaya. So in this way, you can understand that the nature of adversity is nothing but the nature of the four Buddha bodies, the four kayas, in that way. And so that is what that means. And then we have the following slogan, is the unsurpassable shunyata protection. So what this means is that, in short, when one faces adversity, if one can look into its empty nature, all adversity will transform into the path of enlightenment. And so that's simply what it means. When one faces adversity, if one does not fail to look into its nature, which we mentioned just earlier, which is unborn, unabiding, unceasing, and therefore inseparable from the four kayas. If we can look into its nature at all times, we will be able to transform adversity into the path of enlightenment. So that is the way to transform all adversity into the path of enlightenment to absolute bodhicitta. Now for the third topic, transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment to superior actions. For that we have the slogan, the fourfold practice is the best of methods. So what this means is that when one faces adversity, there are 4 best methods to dispel them. And the 4 are, the first of the 4 is to gather the accumulations of merit and wisdom. So in order to do this, you need to basically practice the 6 perfections. The 6 perfections encompasses all the accumulations of merit and wisdom. So you can practice giving and moral conduct, and giving, by that I mean charity. And then you can practice moral conduct, you can practice patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom, and so on. And by that, you will be practicing or accumulating the merits, the accumulations of merit and wisdom. And so that is the first way to dispel adversity. It is one of the first of the 4 superior methods to dispel adversity. The second superior method to dispel adversity is to confess all of one's negative deeds in front of the Guru and the 3 jewels. So from beginningless time, we have accumulated many negative deeds due to our ignorance, attachment, and hatred. So we need to confess all of these. And if we can confess all of these to the Guru, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then that also helps, and it is considered as one of the second superior methods in dispelling adversity. The third superior method in dispelling adversity is to offer dharmas, as we call it in Tibetan, or you could say just offer food to the harmful spirits. So when we practice the Dharma, there's always obstacles, and in many cases, there are actual harmful spirits that are creating obstacles in the progress of one's Dharma practice. So therefore, we need to offer food to them to sort of ask them to not bother oneself in one's Dharma practice. Actually, there's 2 ways to practice this in offering food to the harmful spirits. There's a way to for the experienced mind trainer practitioner to offer food to the harmful spirits, and there is a way for the sort of a beginner level mind training practitioner to offer food to the harmful spirits. So when the experienced practitioner offers food to the harmful spirits, they will think something like, or they will call upon the harmful spirits and say something like, you have been very beneficial to me because to all of the obstacles that you have been all of the obstacles that you've been making me go through in my Dharma practice, it has been helping me to deal with my self-grasping. So therefore, you are very kind to me. So please continue. So I offer this food to you. Please continue to harm me, perform obstacles, so I can strengthen my mind training. So this is the way to offer food to the harmful spirits for experienced mind trainer. But for those who are unexperienced, like myself, and the first beginner level type, the way we can offer is by calling upon the harmful spirits and telling them that I wish to practice my Dharma in peace. Please do not harm me. I offer this food to you. Please take it with you and be satisfied and be gone. So that is the way to practice, or you could say offer food to the harmful spirits for a beginner sort of level mind training practitioner. So this is the third superior method in transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment. Now, the fourth superior method is to offer dharmas, or also you could say offer food to the Dharma protectors. In Buddhism, we have Dharma protectors, especially in Vajrayana. So the Dharma protectors are usually those who protect oneself. Their main job or duty is to protect the Dharma practitioner, to support the Dharma practitioner, to protect them from harm and obstacles, and to support the Dharma practice and such as in strengthening the Dharma practice, and so on. So we need to offer the food as offerings to the Dharma protectors, out of gratitude for their service, and in order to request them to continue their good work. So this is the fourth way, or superior method, in transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment. And then the slogan following that reads, whatever you encounter, apply the practice. What this means is that when suddenly, for example, when you have a headache, for example, you should pray that may all of the headaches which all sentient beings are experiencing right now ripen upon my headache. And then when you are experiencing a stomach ache, you can think, may all of the stomach aches that sentient beings are experiencing ripen upon me right now. So just when suddenly when such pains occur, you should try to be able to bring the practice in right at that moment by bringing all of the other sufferings upon oneself. So this is what that means. So with that, we have completed the third topic, which is transforming adversity into the path of enlightenment. Now we come to the fourth, which is applying the practice throughout the whole of life. So the first slogan reads, the essence of the instruction briefly stated. So what that means is the essence of all Mahayana instructions. And then the slogan following that is to apply yourself to the 5 strengths. So that means that the essence of all Mahayana practices is to apply the 5 strengths, or the 5 powers. So there are 5 strengths. The first strength is the strength of benefit. So what that means is to think that from this very day up until I attain enlightenment, every day I shall practice the 2 bodhicittas, relative and absolute bodhicitta. So if you could think from this day on up until I attain enlightenment, every day I shall practice the 2 bodhicittas, then that is the power of benefit, or you could say the strength of benefit. It is the first of the 5 strengths. Then the second strength is the strength of familiarity, or the power of familiarity. It is to practice or to meditate on the 2 bodhicittas, absolute and relative, again and again. So if you practice or meditate on these 2 bodhicittas again and again, you're basically becoming familiar with the practice, and therefore it's called the strength of familiarity. So that is the second strength. And then there's the third strength, which is called the power of the white seed, or the strength of the white seed. What that means is that in order for the bodhicitta to be born and to increase, in order for it to strengthen, if one makes offerings to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha as much as one can, and that is the strength of the white seed. So this is basically, you need to make offerings to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in order for the bodhicitta to strengthen and increase. First of all, to be born, and then once it's born, to strengthen and increase. So this is the third strength. The fourth strength is the power of remorse. So that is to recollect the faults of self-grasping. So if you're able to recollect the faults of self-grasping, then that is the fourth strength of the 5 strengths. It's called the strength of remorse. Then there is the fifth strength, which is the strength of aspiration. That is to pray, to make the aspiration, or to pray, to be able to practice and meditate on bodhicitta from lifetime to lifetime up until one attains enlightenment. So if you can make that prayer, that so that one may be able to practice successfully practice from one lifetime to another up until enlightenment is attained, that prayer is called the strength of aspiration. So these are the 5 strengths. And then following that, there's a slogan, the Mahayana advice for transference. So when we speak of transference here, it means the transference from this lifetime to the
next. It basically means death and rebirth. So the Mahayana advice for transference involves the same 5 strengths. Conduct is important. So what this means is that the Mahayana advice for transference from this lifetime to the next, it basically means the Mahayana practice that we should be doing at the time of death, when the time of death strikes. What practice should we do at the moment of death? So the answer is that we should do the same 5 strengths that was mentioned earlier. At the moment of death, we should, if at best, we should practice the same 5 strengths that was mentioned earlier. And if that is not possible at the moment of death, we should at least try to recollect or think of the Buddha. So that is the practice that we should be doing at the moment of death. And then Chekawa writes, conduct is important. So this means that at the moment of death, the posture that we have at the moment of death is also important because it creates a lot of what we call in Tibetan dendel, or auspicious conditions, interdependent connections, you could say. So at the moment of death, at best, it would be if we can sit in the Vajra posture, especially in the posture of the Buddha Vairocana at the moment of death. And if not that, we should try to at least sit in the cross-legged posture. And if not that, we should try to at least sleep in the posture which Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, the lying posture. It's something similar to that. It should at least be a posture which is in accordance with Dharma, and a posture which is a sign of a Dharma practitioner dying or passing. So that is also important. It sort of creates the auspicious conditions for one to quickly attain enlightenment, I believe. So that is why conduct is important. So with this, we have completed the 4th topic, which is applying the practice throughout the whole of life. And then we have the fifth topic, which is the measure of mind training. There's a slogan, all teachings share a single purpose. And what that means is all teachings share a single purpose, and that purpose is to counter self-grasping. It's to deal with the self-grasping. So as we now see, self-grasping is a really big problem because it's being mentioned, it's connected with everything that was said earlier. So all of the practices are taught by the Buddha, and it was for one single purpose, which is to deal with the self-grasping, to abandon self-grasping. Of the 2 witnesses, rely upon the principal one. So what the slogan means is that there are 2 witnesses. There's others as one's witness, and also oneself as one's witness. Witnesses in the way one lives, the way one thinks, or the way one acts. So what this means is that compared to others, oneself would know best how oneself really is, how oneself really thinks. Other people, they might guess how we think, but they won't really have the right idea at all times. But we can be sure that the best person who would know how one's own thought process is oneself. Oneself knows the best how oneself really is. So therefore, of the 2 witnesses, rely upon the principal one, rely upon yourself, rely upon your own mind to check your own thoughts. So that's what it means. And then following that, it reads, always maintain only a joyful attitude. So what this means is that whether you are happy or sad, always try to maintain a joyful attitude. Don't sort of sulk when you're sad and then be extremely happy when you're joyful when you're happy. But try to be, have a nice expression and to be joyful in any kind of situation, whether you're happy or sad. This especially leaves a good impression upon others, and may also possibly inspire others to enter the path of the Dharma and do Dharma practice. And then it reads, if this can be done even when distracted, you are proficient. So what this means is that if all of the things that were mentioned earlier, especially being keeping a joyful attitude when you are happy or sad, or checking upon your own mind, and so on, even when you are distracted, then it means that you are proficient in mind training. Right now, we need to work hard a bit because our mind is not used to checking upon our own mind, and usually we have a train, sort of like a train of thought process, one after the other, and we just let it pass. We don't really look into it or observe the thought process. So if we are able to observe our thought process naturally, even when we are distracted, if we come to that point where it's just a natural instinct to check upon ourselves, then that is the moment when we can say that we are proficient, or you could say when we have mastered mind training. So this is what that means. Now we come to the sixth topic, the commitments of mind training. So for that, we have the slogan, train constantly in the three basic principles. So the first basic principle is to not go against the commitments that one has made. When we practice Dharma, we make many commitments not to accumulate such negative deeds and so on. So we need to make sure that we don't go against the promises that we made, the commitments that we made. So that is the first basic principle. The second basic principle is to not go to places where there are like spirits, and also where there are diseases and so on, just in order to prove or to show off that one is a practitioner of mind training. So one should not, basically the point is not to show off that one is a practitioner of mind, that one practices mind training. That is the second basic principle. The third basic principle is not to be able to practice mind training towards some and not be able to practice towards some, but to be able to practice towards all sentient beings, to be able to practice mind training towards all sentient beings as the object impartially. So if we are able to practice towards mind training towards one's loved ones, but not towards the people that we don't like, then that's not correct. So we need to try to practice towards all sentient beings impartially. So that is the third basic principle. Then following that, there's the slogan, change your attitude, but remain natural. So what that means is that it's saying that you don't need to put too much emphasis on the body and the speech. Whatever you were doing, your actions, whatever the way you lived earlier, however you used your body or speech before, you can just let it be as it is. What you should really be focusing upon is the mind. The mind is the most important thing you should be focusing upon. As for the body and speech, you can just leave it as it is and just let it be natural. Don't try to being such a big change upon your body, speech, and mind altogether. But leave the body, speech natural as it is and focus on the mind. And if you can focus on the mind and bring change upon the mind, then naturally the body and the speech is going to be changed as well, because the mind is the one which controls the actions of the body and speech. So that is the point of this slogan. And then Chekawa writes, don't speak of injured limbs. So what this means is that one should not speak of other people's injured limbs. So for example, if someone is losing an arm, has lost an arm or lost a leg or deformed or things like that, you should not make fun of them or speak about their their conditions in front of them, because that may be hurtful to them, for them to hear that, and it may be rude as well. So one should refrain from speaking of other people's injured limbs. And also it says, don't ponder others' flaws. So what that means is that even if it's an animal, not just humans, but even if it's an animals flaws, you should not see it as flaws, on their part existing on the outside, but you should, whatever flaws you see in other people, you should try to understand that it is your own mind's perception, and all of the flaws that you see on others is your own mind's flaws. So this is what you need to understand. Following that, there's the slogan, train first with the strongest destructive emotions. So what this means is that, all of us have many emotions, but it differs for each person. Some people have stronger hatred, some people have stronger attachment compared to others, and so on. So therefore, you would be the best one, you yourself would be the best one to know which is the strongest emotion that you have, so the strongest defilement. So therefore, you should rely upon yourself. And if you still don't know, if you still can't tell which is the strongest emotion that you have, you can at least ask a friend. You can ask for their opinion, what they think of you, what they see that you could probably change in yourself. You can ask for their opinions, and by asking that, you might also figure out what is the strongest emotion that you have. And then once you know it and recognize the strongest destructive emotion you have, you can deal with it. So that is that. And then there's this next slogan: abandon any expectations of results. So when you practice mind training, you should not have any hopes, especially hopes related to worldly thoughts, worldly results, such as you should not practice mind training in order to attain fame. You shouldn't practice mind training in order to be respected by others. You shouldn't practice mind training to be regarded as a great Dharma practitioner and thus receive lots of followers and attain lots of wealth and so on. These are all not right. So when you practice mind training, you should do it solely so that you can bring a change in your own mind stream, not for those other types of results that I mentioned. And so then there's the second, following that, there's the next slogan, give up poisonous food. So what this means is that when practicing mind training, one should make sure that one's practice of mind training is not mixed with self-grasping. Right? And you could say it should not be mixed with the idea of a true existence in things. So when you practice mind training, we should never hold on to the concept that things truly exist, especially when you practice absolute bodhichitta. So that is what that means. And then there's a slogan, don't be so loyal to the cause. So what that means is that if someone harms you, don't hold on to that as a grudge for a very long time. If someone harms you, you should try to just let it go and forget about it as soon as possible and move on. Don't hold on to the past, because holding on to the past is not really going to help you in any way. It's already done. So you should just forgive and move on and don't hold a grudge. This is all parts, sort of like branch practices of mind training. And then there's the slogan, don't lash out in retaliation. So what this means is that when other people say harmful things to you, things that are unpleasant, you should not lash out in retaliation, but rather practice patience and also, once again, move on. And so that is the meaning of that. And then following that, it says, don't lie in ambush. So what that means is that you should not search for the chance to harm others after they have harmed you. So for example, someone has just harmed oneself. So after that, we should not hold on to that and always try to find the right chance and the right opportunity to retaliate or harm them back. That's not right. We should move on and forgive and of course practice compassion upon them. That's mind training. And then we have a slogan, don't strike a vulnerable point. So what this means is that don't do anything that would hurt another person's heart. So don't do anything that would hurt another person's heart or their mind, or you could say don't do anything that would hurt another person's feelings. That is what this means. And then we have the slogan, don't transfer the ox's burden to the cow. So what this means is don't blame other people's mistake. Don't blame others for the mistakes that oneself has made. So you may make many mistakes in your life, but you should never blame it upon others. You should take a responsibility for the mistakes that you have made and never blame it upon others. That is also a part of mind training. Then we have the slogan, don't be competitive. So this means that when you are amongst many other mind training practitioners, which are sort of like equal to oneself in the level of mind training, you should not wish to receive special treatment, special respect, and so on, especially when you are amongst other mind training practitioners. That is what it means by don't be competitive. Then it says, don't misperform the rites. What that means is that don't take loss for the sake of a good future, and don't practice mind training for the sake of avoiding unfortunate circumstances in the future. So what this means is that sort of like by that, when I mean don't take loss for the sake of a good future, you should not do foolish things in hopes that you will have a good future, you know, resulting from your actions. You should do good things. You should do things that are worthwhile to perform in order to experience good things in the future, not things that are useless and then hope for good things in the future. And you should not practice mind training in order to avoid unfortunate circumstances in the future, but rather should practice mind training in order to control one's mind and deal with the emotions. The emphasis is a bit different. So that is what it means. And then we have the slogan, don't reduce gods to demons. So what we mean by demon here is that usually anyone who harms oneself would at times be labeled as a demon. And if a god happens to harm oneself, then that god would also be labeled as a demon. For example, Mara, the god or demon, you could say, who created obstacles for Prince Siddhartha to attain enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. He's actually a god. He's one of the gods living in the higher heavens, but he's just one of the evil gods. And therefore, we call him a demon, but he's also a god. So that's just an example. So basically, demon, what harms us, we call that demons usually. So likewise, the point of practicing mind training is to abandon self-grasping. That's the whole point of practicing mind training. It's to abandon self-grasping. If by practicing mind training, one thinks, I'm a good practitioner, I'm a good practitioner in mind training, and so on, I'm good at this and that in controlling my thoughts. And if one starts to generate pride due to one's practices, then that is a mistake. And sort of like the Dharma practice itself, which is like the god has become like a demon. The Dharma practice itself, which is like the medicine, has turned into poison. The whole point of mind training was to deal with the self-grasping, but if you use mind training and that leads to the self-grasping to increase and to strengthen, then that's a big problem. So that's why Chekawa says, don't reduce gods to demons. And following that, there's the slogan, don't seek others' misery as crutches of your own happiness. What that means is that you should not wish for others' misery for the sake of your own happiness. Sometimes, when we have enemies, we might wish for them to suffer so that one can be happy, because one really wishes for them to suffer. But this is not going to work for any. If you're going to practice mind training, you need to abandon this kind of thought. You should not wish for others' misery for the sake of your own happiness. That's what it means. Now we come to the final topic, the precepts of mind training. The first slogan of this reads, do everything with a single intention. So what that means is that whatever meditation one does, it should be done out of the wish for benefiting others, not really too much for oneself, but of course, mind training itself is a category of Mahayana practice, so there always needs to be, it needs to be done for the sake of others. Of course, you're doing it for yourself as well, but the emphasis is on others, and by doing it for others, oneself also receives the benefits all along. So one does not really need to focus all on one's own benefit, but one should do it for the benefit, mainly for the benefit of others. And the way we can do this is that we understand that all sentient beings have once been at a point, one's own mother. They are suffering right now. And when they were once mother in the past, they were very kind to oneself, but sadly they are suffering right now. So I must attain enlightenment so that I can, drag them out of their suffering. So I can deliver them out of samsara to a happier state, to true happiness, which is Buddhahood. But right now, I cannot do that because I myself am a sentient being similar to them. And I forget about attaining enlightenment first. I don't even have control over my own mind. I don't even have control over my own thoughts. So for that, I must practice mind training. So this is how it's all connected with the benefit of others. So after that, we have the slogan, counter all adversity with a single remedy. So what that means is that when one practices the Dharma, there may be many obstacles, and all such obstacles should be dispelled through the practice of Donglen, giving and exchanging, giving one's happiness and taking on their suffering, which we mentioned earlier. So that's what it means. And then it reads 2 tasks, one at the beginning and one at the end. What that means is that there are 2 tasks that we need to do in a day, especially for a Dharma practitioner. The first task should be done in the early morning when one wakes up, and the second task should be done at night, right before one goes to sleep. So when one wakes up in the morning, one should think, today I shall practice the 2 bodhicittas and make that sort of commitment. That is the first task that a mind training practitioner must do. And then the second task is at night, one should inspect how did one's practice go today? In the whole day, how did my practice work out? Did it work out well or did it not work out well? If it worked out well, you should rejoice that it worked out well and make the promise and commitment to continue the good job, the good works, and so on in the following day. If it didn't work out well, you should immediately confess to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for failing to practice the mind training. And you should promise not to make the same mistakes again and to make the resolve to work, or you could say, try harder the next day. So these are the 2 tasks that one needs to do. Following that, there's the next slogan, whichever of the 2 occurs, be patient. This means when happiness or unhappiness, also any other types such as fame or bad reputation, and then respect and disrespect, or whatever kind of these different pairs of situations occurs to oneself, good or bad. There are many different types of good and bad types of situations. So whatever types of these pairs occur to oneself, one should be able to learn to be patient in either situation, One should not be too excited when one receives respect or when one is happy, and one should not be too sad when one has a bad reputation or if one is unhappy or if others disrespect you. You should be patient and sort of like neutral in every kind of situation. This is an important practice of the mind training practitioner. And then we have this next slogan, keep the 2 even at your life's expense. So what this means is that even at the risk of your own life, make sure not to go against your samaya and your commitments. Make sure not to go against the promises that you made and to hold strong to the promises that you made. This is what it means. Just don't go against the promises that you made and try to keep the commitments at all times. Even if it means, even if you're at the risk of your life, even if it risks your own life, you should not give up. There's an example when Atisha, the great master, went to Tibet, arrived in Tibet, he would often ask any new arrivals from India to Tibet, is there any new news going on in India? Do you have any news to bring from India? And one day, an Indian person came into Tibet and told Atisha, well, there's not much going on, but recently some heretics captured a Buddhist layperson, and they told that Buddhist layperson, if you abandon your refuge in the 3 jewels, we will let you go. We will release you. If you do not abandon your refuge in the 3 jewels, we will kill you. And when they threatened the Buddhist layperson replied, I may be able to verbally say I will abandon the 3 jewels, but in my heart, I will never be able to abandon the 3 jewels. And due to that, he was killed because he did not abandon the 3 jewels in the end. And when Atisha heard that, he said, now that is how a true Dharma practitioner should be. And so this is an example of how you don't give up your values, your commitments, even at the risk of your own life. So that's just an example. Then we come to the next slogan, train in the 3 difficulties. So what this means is that first, when the defilement arises in one's mind, we should try to remember the antidote. There are many antidotes which we already mentioned earlier. All of the mind training techniques are the antidotes. So when the defilement arises in one's mind, we should remember the antidote. In the middle, we should dispel the defilements. So in the beginning, we recognize the fault and remember the antidote, bring in the antidote. Meanwhile, we should dispel the defilements through the use of the antidotes. And finally, at the end, we should resolve to never make the same mistakes again, and to never let the defilements or emotions take control of one's mind. So this is the 3 difficulties. It's kind of difficult to practice this. That's why I guess it's called the 3 difficulties. It's first of all difficulty to catch the negative emotion the moment it arises in one's mind. And it's also difficult to bring in the emotion, the antidote, sorry. It's also difficult to bring in the antidote. And then it's difficult to abandon the defilement through the antidote. And it's difficult to make the resolution to not make the same mistake again. But even though these are 3 difficulties, it's mind training after all. And training, the result of training is getting used to it. There's nothing which becomes, that stays difficult once you get used to it. Everything becomes easy at one point once you get used to it. So right now it's difficult, but if you continue to practice daily, then it will become easy one day. Then the slogan following that is, acquire the 3 main provisions. So acquire the 3 main provisions. What that means is that one should work hard in finding a good teacher. That is the first provision. One should search for a good teacher. One should make good efforts in searching for a good teacher. And one should also work hard in developing good devotion, stable devotion. That is the second provision. And then one should also work hard in acquiring food and clothes. That is because without food and clothes, it's also an obstacle to practice the Dharma. You also need good living conditions to practice the Dharma. So these 3 are important provisions that we need to work hard for in attaining. So the 3 provisions are finding a good teacher, or you could say searching for a good teacher, developing devotion, or stabilizing devotion, and acquiring food and clothes. Food and clothes is counted as 1. So those are the 3 main provisions. Then the slogan after that reads, cultivate the 3 that must not decline. What that means is that faith, there are 3 things that we need to cultivate, which must not decline. The first is faith. Faith which does not decline in the teacher. So faith which does not decline in the teacher is the first thing we need to cultivate. The second is joy. Joy which does not decline in meditating on bodhichitta. So this is the second thing we need to cultivate. Joy which does not decline in meditating on bodhichitta. And then the third is no declining of commitments which one has made. So they should we should cultivate the stable commitments that we have, and to a point where there's no declining in the commitments. So these are the three things that we must cultivate that must not decline. Then the slogan after that reads, keep the three from which you must not separate. Keep the three from which you must not separate. What that means is that body, speech, and mind should not be separate from the three good deeds. So the three good deeds are the good actions of the body, the good actions of the speech, and the good actions of the mind. What this means is that basically one should always put one's body, speech, and mind into good use, which is basically we should always put these three into the service of accumulating, of helping others and accumulating good deeds. And that's what it means. And then following that, it reads, apply the training impartially to all. What this means is, it simply means to train in practicing mind training towards all sentient beings impartially, not towards some and not towards some like your loved ones, and not being able to do it towards those who you don't like, but you should be able to do it towards all sentient beings impartially. Then the slogan following that means, it reads, it is vital that it be deep and all pervasive. What that means is that one should learn to practice mind training, not by the mouth alone, but one should learn how to practice mind training from the depths of one's heart. It should not be just on the mouth that I practice this mind training, you should do this and this, and I should look after my thoughts and so on. Not just reminding from for example, we earlier mentioned of that slogan that Nagarjuna, one of Nagarjuna's writings or sayings, that we need to verbally recite it so that oneself can hear it and remind oneself. So this is, you could connect this with what's said here, that when we practice mind training, we should not just use the mouth for mind training, but we should really practice mind training from the depths of one's heart, in all situations, in all places, and in all times. So that's what it means. Then the slogan following that reads, meditate constantly on those who have been set apart. What that means is that one should practice mind training carefully towards those who have been kind to you, those who challenge you, and those who repay your kindness in evil ways. So basically, one should bring the mind training in any kind of scenario, and practice it towards any kind of object, any kind of sentient being. There will be some who have been really kind to you. Towards them, you need to practice mind training. There will be some who always challenge you and give you a difficult time in your life. You also need to bring in mind training and practice it towards them. And sometimes, and there are people who you've been really kind to, but they, repay your kindness in very desperate, very evil kind of ways. So even towards those type of people, the ungrateful type of people, you need to be able to practice mind training towards them as well. So that's what it means. And then we have the next slogan, don't be dependent on external conditions. So what this means is that usually most type of Dharma practices requires the conditions, the correct causes and conditions to gather in order to practice Dharma, in order to do Dharma practice. But for mind training, you don't really need the conditions, the causes and conditions to practice to come together, because mind training is a type of practice which you can bring into any situation. So whether you are happy, whether you're happy, you can practice mind training. Whether you are sad, even at the moment you don't want to practice Dharma, you can practice mind training, and so on. So we should practice just as mind training should be practiced, which is to be practiced in every kind of scenario. And then there's the next slogan, this time practice what's most important. What that means is that most of the past lives that we have taken in samsara have mostly, gone to waste. We have most likely not put it to a good use. But now, this time, when we have attained a human birth, we should put good use to it and bring meaning to this life. We should make this life a meaningful one. And the way we should bring meaning to this life is to bring meaning to this life through practicing mind training. So that's what it means. And then there's the next slogan, don't misunderstand. So for this, there's actually 6 different kinds of misunderstanding. So the first type of misunderstanding is to be able to work hard, being unable to work hard in performing virtue, but being easily able to perform non-virtue. So this is the first type of misunderstanding. Unable to work hard to do good things, but easily able to do what you shouldn't be doing. So that's the first type of misunderstanding. The second type of misunderstanding is not wishing to confess the negative deeds that one has accumulated, but still wishing to live a happy life. That's a misunderstanding, because if you really want to wish a happy life, you need to confess every kind of negative deeds that you want, that you have accumulated. Otherwise, there's not really a way to live happily. But there are some people who really are reluctant to confess their negative deeds, but still wish for a happy life. So that's the second type of misunderstanding. Then the third type of misunderstanding is the misunderstanding of taste. What this means is that there are some type of people who do not wish to experience the taste of hearing the Dharma, contemplating on the Dharma, and meditating on the Dharma, but rather they wish to experience the taste of beautiful forms, the taste of pleasant sounds, the taste of good smells, the taste of sweet tastes, and the taste of soft touches. So this is sort of the wishing or interested in the wrong type of taste. You should be more, for a Dharma practitioner, especially a mind training practitioner, you should be more interested in the taste of hearing the Dharma, contemplating the Dharma, and meditating on the Dharma, rather than being attached to the taste or the taste of form, smell, and then taste itself, and sounds and feeling. Those are not the tastes which you should really be interested in. And then the fourth type of misunderstanding is misunderstanding of compassion. Some people practice compassion on Dharma practitioners, towards Dharma practitioners, instead of those who are actually creating negative deeds or accumulating negative deeds. So, actually the real focus or object of your compassion should be those who are doing negative deeds, because there's a good reason to practice compassion towards them, because they are creating the causes for their own suffering. And you should be rejoicing in the good deeds of the Dharma practitioner, because they are creating causes for the happiness of not just themselves, but the happiness of others as well. But there are some people who, see things the opposite way and practice compassion on Dharma practitioners, and not on those who are actually creating negative deeds. So this is the misunderstanding of compassion. It's the fourth type of misunderstanding. Then there's the fifth type of misunderstanding. So this is to not be interested, it means to have no interest in practicing the Dharma, but instead to be interested in fulfilling the needs of this life. So this is the fifth type of misunderstanding. Is Manjushri told Sachin Kuan Yingbo, which it's in the first slogan of Parting from the Four Attachments. If you are attached to this life, you are not a true Dharma practitioner. So it has the same meaning here. So if you want to be a true Dharma practitioner, you should not be attached to this life. You should not, any Dharma practice you do should not be for the benefit of this life, but should be for the benefit of future lives. So likewise, when we practice mind training, we should do it out of interest in the Dharma, and do it for future lives, and not be interested in this life. Otherwise, if we call ourselves Buddhist practitioners, but still are only interested in achieving fame, wealth, and respect in society, and so on, and that's if that happens to be more important to us compared to the actual Dharma practice, then we may call ourselves Dharma practitioners, but that doesn't really mean we are Dharma practitioners. That does not make us Dharma practitioners. So that's the point. Then the sixth type of misunderstanding is to enjoy seeing others suffer, but to be sad seeing others being happy. So this is the sixth type of misunderstanding. So we need to, as Chekawa said, don't misunderstand. So we should not have any of these. Then the slogan following that reads, don't be inconsistent. What that means is that instead of practicing sometimes and sometimes practicing and sometimes not practicing, one should be able to practice mind training at all times and in all situations. Because training means to get used to it, and you need to practice constantly in order to really get used to it. So that's why don't be inconsistent. Don't be like that type of Dharma practitioner who is able to practice on auspicious days and not being able to practice on just usual normal days, or being able to practice some days and not on some days. Try to practice every day. That's what it means. And then following that, the slogan reads, train wholeheartedly. So what this means is that when one trains in the practice of mind training, one should practice without any doubt. One should not practice with such doubt whether this practice will be beneficial for oneself or not, but one should have trust in the practice and practice wholeheartedly. And then the slogan after that reads, gain freedom through discernment and analysis. So what this means is that you should understand whether your mind is practicing mind training sort of like roughly or thoroughly, and to make sure that it's practicing thoroughly so that one can escape from the faults of self-grasping. So, if you're practicing mind training roughly, that's good. And of course, for beginners, that is understandable, but we really need to work hard in noticing all of the even the small details in one's thought process. And even, not just should we deal with the gross negative emotions like hatred, anger, and so on, the ones that are really noticeable, but we should also focus on the small negative emotions that are difficult to notice in our mind. We should even focus on those too. So we need to focus on mind training thoroughly. That's what this means, what this slogan means. And then after that, it says, don't be boastful. So what this means is that even if one may have helped someone greatly, you should not be proud of it, and you should always stay humble. This is what it means. And after that, it says, don't be irritable. So what this means is that when others show or speak unpleasant things to you, you should not do the same back to them just because you're irritated. So they may say whatever they want to you, but you should practice patience and control your thoughts. Even if you're irritated, you should try to practice patience. And that is the mind training also. And then following that, it says, don't be temperamental. So this means that whoever it may be with, never be ready to fight with them at any time. And there's some type of people who are ready to just fight with anyone, the moment they get on your nerve. But this is not going to work if you're going to practice mind training. You should be able to, again, practice patience, keep your thoughts in line, keep them under control, and stay humble and practice patience. So that's the point. And then following that, it says, don't seek acknowledgement. So when you practice mind training, you should not have hopes of any kind of receiving any kind of acknowledgement from others, such as that, oh, you're practicing mind training so well, you've become such a good and wonderful mind training practitioner and so on. You should not really look forward to any of those kind of type of praises or acknowledgement. So just don't look forward to those. And even if they do, others may, if you're actually really practicing well, others may praise you. And when you hear that, you should sort of just stay neutral, don't be too excited about it. Because if you get too excited about it, it's likely that you will fall into a trap of being proud. And then all of the efforts you've made in your mind training goes to ruin like that. So therefore you need to be careful. There are many traps when you practice mind training. So you need to look out for all of them. And then it reads, the essence of the nectar-like instructions for transforming into the path of awakening, the 5 prevalent signs of degeneration was passed down from the one from Golden Isle. So what this means that all of the teachings that were taught earlier, all of the instructions of mind training were taught by Gyuma Lingpa, the master from Indonesia, who is the guru of Atisha, and he passed. Gyuma Lingpa passed the teachings to Atisha. Atisha passed it to his disciples, and came to Sharawa eventually. Sharawa passed it to Geshe Chekawa, the present author, and so on. And that's how these teachings came about. He's just basically introducing the source of all of these teachings, which is Gyuma Lingpa, who lived in the Golden Island, which is basically Indonesia. So these teachings come from the master Gyuma Lingpa, who lived in Indonesia. And all of these teachings are sort of mind training instructions, which can be practiced in the times of the 5 degenerations. There are 5 degenerations. The decline of earth is the degeneration of time. The decline of body is the degeneration of sentient beings. The decline of soul is the degeneration of life. The decline of lay people's virtue is the degeneration of defilements. And the decline of the ordained one's virtue is the degeneration of view. So these are the times of the 5 degenerations. So basically he's saying that these above mentioned instructions were passed down from the master Gyuma Lingpa originally, and came down up until Geshe Chekawa himself. And all of these are practices which can be practiced in such times as now, which are the times of the 5 degenerations. And then he writes, when karmic seeds left over from former trainings were aroused in me, I felt great interest. And so without regard for suffering or disparagement, I sought instructions on subduing ego clinging. Now, even in death, I shall have no regrets. So what this means is that earlier, before he started practicing these mind training instructions himself, he was controlled by his karma, by his negative deeds and karmic obscurations and so on. He had no control over his thoughts, his mind. He had no control over his mind. But now that he has received all of these instructions, which serve the purpose of dealing and you could say abandoning self-clinging or self-grasping, now that he has this Dharma practice with him, this mind training practice, these 7 points of mind training practice with him, if he were to die tonight, he would have no regrets because he has practiced these well. So this is what Geshe Chekawa wrote. So we also need to come to this point when we practice mind training. We need to come to this point where even if one were to die tonight, one would have no regrets because one has practiced what one should perfectly. So this is the teaching, and with this we have completed the 7 points of mind training. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you so much for inspiring us to wholeheartedly train our mind to overcome that self-grasping. And I hope nobody is dying tonight. But yeah, we are prepared now. Thank you so much. And yeah, please teach us again. It's such an honor to receive your first teaching of this new year, and always so wonderful to see you. And also thanks to everybody who joined. It was very wonderful to see all of you, some usual suspects that I see here and there in other Zooms, and then also some from South America, North America, which was like super early for them today. So thanks for that dedication, and also it was great to see the whole Kasavirupa Sangha there. That was also very wonderful. So thank you all, and I would just do some short dedication in the end. Do we still have time for that? So Paula, can you maybe share them? Okay. By this merit, having attained omniscience and defeated the enemy of wrongdoing, may I free all beings from the ocean of existence with its tumultuous waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Just as the heroic Manjushri who knows everything as it is, and as Samantabhadra likewise did too, just so to follow all of them and train myself, I perfectly dedicate these meritorious actions. May the precious supreme bodhichitta arise in those in whom it has not arisen. Having arisen, may it not diminish, but ever expand more and more. As long as space remains, and as long as the world remains, may we too remain to elevate the suffering of the world. In the long life prayer for Dungse Rinpoche, Amitayus, foremost of the deathless, victorious one, Tarema, freeing from the conditions of death and sickness and obstacles, Vijaya, victorious over the Lord of Death and his demon host, may the three supreme immortal deities bestow glory of long life. Eloquent one from the family lineage with three excellent names, with a discernment that is a delight to the doctrine and beings, taming as appropriate without obstruction through your Vajra activity, may this great ruler of the three realms live long. By the power of praying sincerely in that way, may we have the good fortune of your living long, upholding and spreading the tradition of the reverent Sakya path through explication and practice, which greatly increase study and reflection. Thank you so much. And yeah, please teach us again, whenever it's possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.